In 1983, a school lunch tray might hold a slab of pizza on a rectangle of crust, a scoop of neon orange cheese sauce, and a carton of whole chocolate milk, all for about 90 cents. Today, half of what sat on that tray would break federal nutrition law. Here's the twist. Number 14 on this list got quietly pulled once people started asking what was actually in it. And number 6? It's now banned outright in thousands of American schools, not for taste, but for safety. These 25 foods fed an entire generation of kids who somehow came home hungry anyway. Some vanished the moment the rules changed in 2012. Others disappeared because a single ingredient turned out to be a real problem. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because you probably ate at least 10 of these. Let's count down. Number 25. Fruit cocktail in heavy syrup was the fruit on 1,000 lunch trays, and calling it fruit was generous. It arrived in a little compartment scooped straight from a number 10 can. Pale cubes of pear and peach swimming in sugar water, with exactly 3 grapes and 1 lonely maraschino cherry that started a small war at every table. The syrup was so sweet, it left a film on the roof of your mouth. Cafeteria workers ladled it out with an ice cream scoop, and the leftover juice got tipped back to drink. In the 1980s, it counted as a full fruit serving under federal guidelines, no questions asked. Then the science on added sugar caught up. When the new meal standards rolled out after 2012, canned fruit packed in heavy syrup was pushed out in favor of fresh fruit or fruit in its own juice. That sugary little cup, the one you actually look forward to, would never clear a menu today. Number 24. Buttered noodles were the beige heart of the cafeteria, a mound of plain egg noodles glistening under a lake of margarine and a shake of salt. No sauce, no vegetable, no pretense. On days when the main line looked frightening, buttered noodles were the safe harbor, and lunch ladies piled them high because they cost almost nothing to make. That was the whole point. A giant bag of noodles and a tub of margarine stretched across 400 trays. But here's what sank them. The noodles were refined white flour. The margarine was loaded with the partially hydrogenated oil we now call trans fat, and there wasn't a whole grain in sight. Modern rules demand that grains be whole grain rich and cap the fat that made those noodles taste like anything. A plate of pure buttered white noodles today would fail on 3 separate counts before it ever left the kitchen. Number 23. Canned green beans were the vegetable America's schools ran on, and they landed on the tray defeated. Boiled soft and gray-green, salted into submission, they slumped in their compartment with all the life cooked out of them. Kids pushed them to the edge, hid them under the roll, or dared each other to eat a whole spoonful. Every child of the era can still picture that exact mushy texture and the faint metallic taste of the can. In the 1980s, sodium simply was not on anyone's radar, and a single serving of those beans could carry a startling amount of salt from the canning liquid alone. When federal sodium limits arrived with the new standards, heavily salted canned vegetables became a liability, and lower sodium or fresh and frozen options took over. The saddest little side dish in America didn't vanish because kids hated it. It vanished because of the salt. Number 22. Jell-O with suspended fruit was cafeteria engineering at its proudest, a wobbling square of cherry red or lime green gelatin with cubes of canned fruit magically frozen in place. Getting the fruit to float instead of sink took timing. The lunch staff quietly mastered, and the finished squares jiggled on the tray like something from a science lab. Kids poked them, watched them shiver, and ate them in one triumphant bite. Sometimes a dollop of fake whipped topping crowned the whole thing. It was pure sugar and artificial dye. And in the 80s, that was a feature, not a flaw. But gelatin dessert brings almost nothing nutritionally. And once meals had to hit real targets for whole grains, produce, and calories, a square of dyed sugar water had no place to fit. The dessert that fascinated an entire generation got jiggled right off the menu. Number 21. Butterscotch pudding was the quiet luxury of the lunch line, served in a little pleated paper cup with a skin on top that you either loved or peeled away in disgust. That skin divided cafeterias as sharply as anything. The pudding itself was thick, golden, and almost caramel sweet, made from powder and milk in vats and portioned out by the hundreds. On a good day, it was chocolate. On a great day, it was butterscotch. Kids traded milk cartons and entire entrees for a second cup. But pudding is essentially sugar, fat, and starch dressed up as dessert, and it often carried the trans fats hiding in the era's processed toppings. Under today's smart snacks rules and the calorie caps written into the meal pattern, a routine cup of butterscotch pudding simply blows the budget. What felt like a small daily reward is now the kind of thing schools save for a rare treat, if they serve it at all. Number 20. Rice Krispie treats came in a slab the size of a paperback, dense with marshmallow and margarine, wrapped in cellophane, or cut fresh from a sheet pan the size of a car door. They stuck to your teeth, your fingers, and the wrapper all at once, and half the fun was gnawing the marshmallow strings apart. Lunch staff made them in bulk because cereal, margarine, and marshmallows were cheap, shelf-stable, and beloved by every kid alive. For years, they were an everyday offering, not a special occasion. Then the math changed. A treat that size is almost entirely sugar and fat, and the margarine of the era carried trans fats that the FDA later moved to eliminate from the food supply. Under the snack standards that took hold after 2014, a portion that large could not be sold in a school, even a la carte. The full-size cafeteria Rice Krispie treat became a casualty of its own glorious excess. Number 19. Cookie Day was a genuine event, and the star was a sugar cookie, roughly the diameter of the tray it sat on. Soft in the middle, faintly crisp at the edge, sometimes frosted in a color that matched the season. It was the reward that made Fridays worth surviving. Lunch ladies baked them in enormous sheets, and the smell rolled down the hallway and reached classrooms an hour before lunch. Kids saved theirs for last, or ate it first out of pure lack of discipline. Nobody counted the calories because nobody was counting anything. That was the 80s. Today, that cookie is a problem on paper before it even hits the oven, exceeding the sugar, fat, and calorie ceilings written into modern school snack rules. Schools that still bake them, shrink them down, or reserve them for rare occasions. The giant Friday cookie, that small weekly celebration, mostly lives in memory now. Number 18. Bug juice was the drink that had no real name and no real fruit. A jug of blindingly bright red or purple liquid poured from a powder into a 5-gallon cooler. It stained lips, tongues, and the corners of every kid's mouth, and it was sweet enough to make your teeth ache. Cafeterias mixed it by the barrel because it cost pennies a gallon, and kids drank it like it was going out of style, which eventually it was. There was essentially nothing in it but sugar, water, citric acid, and food dye. As schools moved to cut sugary drinks, first through district policies and then through the beverage standards that came with the new federal rules, the sugary punches and powdered drinks were among the first things shown the door in favor of water, milk, and limited juice. That electric-colored jug that turned everyone's mouth the same shade would never be poured in a cafeteria today. Number 17. Whole chocolate milk was the crown jewel of the lunch tray, a cold little carton of rich, full-fat chocolate milk that made the whole meal worth it. Kids raced to grab the chocolate before the plane ran out, and the sound of 100 cartons being shaken open was the soundtrack of every cafeteria. It was creamy in a way that fat-free versions simply are not, and for a lot of children, it was the best part of lunch, period. But whole milk carries significant saturated fat, and flavored milk carries a hefty dose of added sugar. When the new standards arrived, schools could only offer flavored milk that was fat-free or low-fat, and even that came under repeated debate. The thick, full-fat chocolate carton of the 80s, the one you'd fight for, disappeared quietly. What's poured today is a leaner, less sugary cousin of the drink a generation actually remembers. Number 16. Nachos with cheese sauce were the tray's guilty pleasure, a pile of triangle chips buried under a ladle of cheese so orange it seemed to glow. That sauce came from a bag or a can, poured warm and gluey, and it bore only a distant relationship to actual cheese. Kids doused everything in it, the chips, the entree, sometimes each other, and licked the compartment clean. It was salty, fatty, and completely irresistible. Nobody asked what the cheese sauce was made of, and that was probably for the best. The problem was everything at once: sky-high sodium, heavy fat, refined grain chips, and processed cheese product with a long ingredient list. Under modern sodium caps and whole grain rules, that classic ladle of glowing sauce over white corn chips fails on multiple fronts. Nachos still show up in some schools, but reworked with baked chips and real cheese. The neon version that defined the decade is gone. Number 15. Salisbury steak was the granddaddy of mystery meat, an oval gray patty of ground beef and filler drowning in brown gravy, served over a scoop of instant mashed potatoes. It arrived preformed and frozen by the case, thawed and heated in enormous ovens, and slid onto the tray under a gravy that hid whatever it needed to hide. Kids poked it, joked about it, and ate it anyway, because the gravy was genuinely good and the potatoes soaked it up. Here's the pattern break, though. That patty was a blend of low-grade beef, soy, breadcrumbs, and sodium-heavy gravy mix. And it was the poster child for the "what's actually in this?" jokes that followed a whole generation into adulthood. Between sodium limits, the push for recognizable whole foods, and shrinking tolerance for heavily processed mystery entrees, Salisbury steak got quietly retired. The meal that launched 1,000 cafeteria jokes couldn't survive its own reputation. Number 14. Sloppy Joes were controlled chaos in a bun, a scoop of saucy ground beef spooned onto a soft white roll that immediately began to fall apart. The sauce was tangy, sweet, and impossible to eat cleanly, which was the entire appeal. Kids wore it on their shirts like a badge, and the lunch staff went through napkins by the crate. It was cheap to make, endlessly scalable, and it turned a small amount of beef into a full meal, exactly what a tight cafeteria budget needed. But the sauce was loaded with added sugar and sodium, the bun was refined white bread, and the whole thing pushed hard against several of the limits schools now have to hit. Modern versions lean on leaner meat, whole grain buns, and dialed-back sauce. The gloriously messy, sugary, salt-heavy original, the one that ruined so many outfits, would never pass inspection today. Number 13. Fish squares were the Friday special that no child requested by name, a rectangular slab of breaded, mystery whitefish shape, fried golden, and served with a dollop of tartar sauce and a lemon wedge nobody used. They arrived frozen and identical, hundreds of perfect rectangles, and hit the fryer or oven in giant batches. The breading was thick, the fish inside was thin, and the smell traveled the entire building. Some kids loved them with ketchup. Most tolerated them. What doomed the fish square was the frying and the breading, refined grain coating, and a cooking method that piled on fat, all landing on the wrong side of the new whole grain and fat rules. Schools still serve fish, but it's baked, whole grain breaded, and portioned to hit the targets. That deep-fried rectangle on a paper tray paired with tartar sauce out of a packet belongs entirely to the past. Number 12. Corn dogs were the handheld champion of the lunch line, a hot dog on a stick sealed in a thick jacket of sweet-fried cornbread. Kids gripped them like scepters, dragged them through ketchup and mustard, and ate the crispy end first. They came frozen by the thousand and reheated fast, which made them a favorite of overwhelmed kitchens on busy days. The batter was sweet, the dog inside was salty, and together they were pure kid food joy. But a corn dog stacks up nearly everything modern rules push against. a processed meat high in sodium and preservatives, wrapped in a refined, sugary batter and traditionally fried. Between sodium caps, whole grain requirements, and scrutiny of processed meats, the classic corn dog got squeezed out or heavily reformulated into leaner, whole grain, baked versions. The original, that sweet fried jacket around a salty dog on a stick, is one of the most missed foods on this entire list. Number 11. Frito pie, the walking taco, was cafeteria theater at its finest. A staffer split open a single-serve bag of corn chips, spooned in seasoned ground beef and a squirt of that neon cheese, and handed it back so you could eat straight from the bag with a plastic fork. No plate, no cleanup, and the sheer novelty made it the most requested day of the month. The chips went soft against the warm meat. The cheese pooled at the bottom, and every kid felt like they were getting away with something. Here's the pattern break. This was one meal built entirely from processed, high-sodium, refined grain parts, the chips, the seasoning packet, the fake cheese, with almost nothing on the tray to balance it. Under today's sodium, whole grain, and portion rules, serving a full meal out of a chip bag is nearly impossible to make compliant. The walking taco, that little edible party, walked right off the menu. Number 10. The chicken patty sandwich was the reliable middle child of the lunch line, a perfectly round breaded chicken puck on a soft white bun, served plain with maybe a packet of mayo. It wasn't exciting, but it was dependable, and on a day when the main entree looked risky, the chicken patty was a safe vote. It came frozen in uniform, thousands of identical circles, and reheated in minutes. Kids added ketchup or nothing and ate it in 4 bites. The trouble was the whole package, a heavily breaded, often fried patty of processed chicken with plenty of sodium sitting on a refined white bun. Once schools had to meet whole grain and fat targets, the classic fried patty on white bread was reworked into baked whole grain bun, lower sodium versions. It still exists in spirit, but the plain, greasy, refined original that a generation ate on autopilot has quietly been replaced. Number 9. Hot dogs were the fastest tray in the building. A boiled or steamed frank tucked into a squishy white bun, ready for a stripe of ketchup and mustard. They were the meal that required almost no effort to serve or to eat, which is exactly why cafeterias leaned on them. Kids devoured them, asked for seconds, and used the buns to mop up whatever else was on the tray. For a lot of children, Hot Dog Day was a genuine highlight, but the classic school hot dog is a processed meat, high in sodium and nitrates, wrapped in refined white bread. And it draws exactly the kind of scrutiny modern nutrition standards were built around. Sodium limits and whole grain requirements forced schools toward leaner, lower sodium franks on whole grain buns served far less often. The everyday hot dog of the 80s, cheap and plain and beloved, became an occasional guest instead of a weekly regular. Number 8. Beefaroni and its canned pasta cousins were the tray's comfort food, a scoop of soft macaroni or wagon wheel pasta swimming in sweet, tangy tomato meat sauce straight from an industrial can. It was warm, it was easy, and it was sweet, in a way real pasta sauce isn't, which is exactly why kids inhaled it. The lunch staff heated it in vats, and it landed on the tray a uniform reddish-brown, glistening. You didn't need teeth to eat it, and that was part of the charm. But canned pasta carries a heavy load of sodium and added sugar, and the pasta itself was refined white flour. When schools had to move to whole grain rich pastas and hit strict sodium and sugar limits, the sweet, salty, canned version couldn't make the cut. Cafeterias still serve pasta, but it's whole grain and lower sodium now. That specific canned, sugary, spoon-soft beefaroni is a flavor locked in the past. Number 7. Peanut butter and jelly was the eternal backup plan. 2 slices of white bread, a smear of peanut butter, a stripe of grape jelly, and total reliability. When a kid wouldn't touch the hot entree, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich was always there. sweet and familiar and impossible to mess up. Cafeterias kept the ingredients on hand precisely because every child would eat it, and it cost almost nothing. It was the great equalizer of the lunch line. Here's the pattern break, and it's the biggest one on this list. This sandwich didn't disappear because of sugar or salt. It disappeared because of safety. Peanut allergies in children rose dramatically from the 1990s onward, and severe reactions can be life-threatening from contact alone. In response, thousands of American schools went fully peanut-free, banning peanut butter from the building entirely. The most harmless-looking food in the entire cafeteria, the sandwich every kid knew, became one of the first things pulled, not for what it did to nutrition, but for what it could do to a child across the room. Number 6. Cheeseburgers were the tray's main event royalty. A thin griddled patty with a folded slice of processed cheese melting over the edge, tucked into a plain white bun. Burger Day pulled kids into the lunch line who normally packed from home. The patties came frozen and uniform, the cheese came in film-wrapped squares, and the buns came soft and white by the truckload. Add ketchup, add mustard, and it was the closest the cafeteria got to fast food. That was the appeal and the problem. Between the fatty patty, the processed cheese, the refined bun, and the sodium stacking up across all three, the classic cheeseburger sits squarely against modern calorie, fat, and whole grain limits. Schools reworked it into leaner patties, whole grain buns, and reduced fat cheese to squeak under the targets. The greasy, salty, gloriously simple cheeseburger of the 80s, the one that made the line stretch to the door, is not the burger schools serve now. Number 5. Tater tots were the side dish kids actually cheered for. Crispy golden cylinders of shredded potato, deep fried and salted, poured onto the tray in a generous heap. They were crunchy outside, fluffy inside, and perfect for dragging through a puddle of ketchup. Cafeterias loved them because they came frozen, cooked fast, and never met a kid who turned them down. Tot Day and Burger Day together were basically a holiday. But the classic tot is deep-fried, high in sodium, and made from refined starch, and the frying is exactly what modern kitchens moved away from. Under the new standards, schools shifted to baked potato products with far less fat and salt, and the fryers themselves started disappearing from cafeteria kitchens. Baked tots exist, and they're fine, but every kid who grew up in the 80s can tell you they are not the same. The deep-fried original, hot and greasy and salty, is one of the great lost sides. Number 4. Macaroni and cheese was the ultimate cafeteria comfort, a scoop of orange elbow pasta bound in cheese sauce so bright it practically hummed. It came in bags of powder and blocks of processed cheese mixed into vats and served in a mound that steamed on the tray. Kids who refused everything else would eat mac and cheese, which is exactly why it appeared so often. It was creamy, salty, and endlessly comforting, the food equivalent of a warm blanket on a cold day. The catch is that classic school mac and cheese stacks up sodium, saturated fat, and refined white pasta all at once, 3 separate strikes against the modern meal pattern. Schools now serve it with whole grain pasta, reduced fat cheese, and tighter sodium, a genuinely different dish. That blindingly orange, ultra-creamy, salt-forward version from the 80s, the one kids requested by name, has been reformulated into something far more careful. Number 3. Cheeseburger's bigger, saltier sibling takes bronze, and it's a controversial one, but the real number 3 is the chicken nugget, and specifically the dinosaur-shaped chicken nugget, the single most beloved shape in cafeteria history. Kids sorted them by dinosaur, traded the T-Rex for the Stegosaurus, and ate the tail first out of pure joy. They came frozen by the case, baked or fried in giant batches, and served with a dipping cup of ketchup or ranch. For a huge share of American kids, nuggets were the best lunch of the week, no contest. But the classic nugget was heavily breaded processed chicken, often fried, high in sodium, wrapped in refined grain coating. As whole grain, fat, and sodium rules tightened, the fun-shaped, deep-fried nugget got reformulated into baked, whole grain breaded, lower sodium versions, and in many places the beloved dinosaur molds quietly vanished. The nugget survives, but the specific greasy, dino-shaped, endlessly tradable, original lives mostly in the memories of the kids who hoarded them. Number 2. There was another tray that defined the decade, and it's the one your stomach still remembers, the crispy chicken sandwich and its fried siblings, but the true runner-up is bigger than any single item. It's the fryer itself and everything that came out of it. Golden, crunchy, salty, and utterly craveable, the deep-fried entrees of the 80s, the patties and tenders and cutlets were the flavor of an entire era. Kitchens ran their fryers all morning, and the smell hung in the air until the last bell. Kids didn't know or care that it was fried. It just tasted incredible. But frying is precisely what modern school kitchens moved away from, first through district health pushes, and then through the fat and sodium limits baked into the new standards. Many cafeterias pulled their deep fryers out entirely and switched to convection ovens. The crispy, greasy, fried-to-order entrees that made lunch feel like a treat are gone, replaced by baked versions that never quite match the crunch a generation remembers. Number 1, and crowning the list, the undisputed king of the American cafeteria, rectangle pizza. Not round, never round. A perfect rectangle of thick, chewy crust, a smear of sweet sauce, and a blanket of cheese that browned in bubbles cut into identical slabs and served on a paper tray. Rectangle pizza was the best day of the week, the meal that pulled every kid into the line and emptied the packed lunches. The crust was refined white flour, the cheese was piled high, the sodium was enormous, and the sauce was sweet enough to notice. It even sparked a real national argument in 2011 when debate erupted over whether the tomato paste on a slice of school pizza should count as a vegetable serving, and lawmakers effectively let it keep counting. That fight tells you everything. Between the refined crust, the fat, the sodium, and the sugary sauce, the original rectangle pizza sits against nearly every rule schools now follow. Modern cafeterias serve whole grain crust, reduced sodium, lighter cheese versions that are healthier, and every kid who grew up in the 80s will swear, simply not the same. The greatest cafeteria food of all time didn't disappear. It was carefully, deliberately rebuilt into a shadow of the slab we grew up on. So there they are, 25 foods that fed a generation and would never survive a modern lunch tray, from the sugary fruit cocktail at number 25 to the legendary rectangle pizza at number 1. Most of them vanished for the same handful of reasons: too much sodium, too much sugar, too much fat, refined grains where whole grains are now required, or in the case of peanut butter, a genuine question of safety. Now, I want to hear from you. Which one do you miss the most? Are you Team Rectangle Pizza, or do you still dream about those dinosaur nuggets and deep-fried tots? Drop your lunch tray order in the comments and tell me which food you would bring back tomorrow if the rules would let you. I have a feeling the pizza is going to win, but I have been surprised before.